also coaching and mentoring a few companies. 2 or 3 companies are signed up with me. And really looking forward to this. My exposure to startups is very limited, but in my commercial vehicle days, over the last 2 to 3 years, we did start reaching out to a lot of startups who are in the Uber cargo type of space, Shipper, Porter, Rivigo, and many of these. These are people I've met quite extensively over the last 2 years, and look forward to interacting with you today and over the next few months. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a founder of a company called Asia.life. We are into corporate wellness. And today I'm looking corporate wellness. And today I'm looking forward to connecting with people who have been dealing with their products and users and finding out their problems, and also looking for mentors to share their knowledge. Basically, that's what I'm looking for in this session.
Met one of your colleagues.
Hi, I'm Vidyut Sharma and I'm co-founder of bookchow.com. We sell quality used books online and we make books more affordable in India.
Hi everyone, my name is Himanshu and I worked in the non-profit sector for 10 to 11 years promoting enterprises in rural areas, and now I am trying to set up a practice. I'm in initial phase, just left my job 3-4 months back, working as a freelance consultant right now and trying to explore if I would be taking up my the business consulting practice in non-profit sector as a full-time venture or not. So I'm just here to network with people, look at what they're doing, hear about their experiences, and thank you.
I'm Ishan. I run a men's styling and grooming company. So everything related to men's aspect, fitness, fashion, styling and grooming, we provide services related to that. It goes by the name of One Man Up.
One Man Up.
One Man Up.
One man.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rishad Gupta. I'll be probably the youngest over here. So I founded inactivestore.com recently, in the last week only. So it's a platform that promotes goods made by rural enterprises and for NGOs who are inclined to help the underprivileged communities. Also, I'm on board with Passion Ventures. It is an education consultancy platform that helps young students in their careers through digital products. So what I'm looking for in this session is tips to market both of these ventures, online as well as offline. Since I'm a student from Delhi University, I need to promote both of these aggressively in Delhi University as well as in India. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from both of the mentors and from the group.
Hi everyone, I'm Rajiv Sinha. I'm not from tech industry at all. I've worked in a very traditional company, ECM Shriram. I entered that company in my first job and I retired from there as their joint managing director. Spent almost 40 years. But these were very exciting years. I think Bhaskar and I were together in IIT and he and both of us joined ECM together. He left and moved to a different track.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shamal. So I basically we can start with the fun, then accelerate for the startups.
Hi, my name is Rishabh Jain. I've been into real estate and construction, and now we are venturing into warehousing. So what I want to get out of this session is some insights into B2B marketing. So earlier we used to do B2C, sell directly to home buyers, but now since in warehousing we'd be leasing to companies who have logistics requirements, e-commerce, auto ancillary units. So yeah, so that would be my focus.
Hi, my name is Anshul Suri. I'm founder of an e-commerce startup called SpotStyle. We'll be launching in the next 10 days.
Can you repeat the name?
SpotStyle. We basically handpick the best of fashion from existing online websites like Jabong and Myntra, but it's all hand curated by a stylist, and that's kind of our forte to break the clutter and bring you the best of fashion all in one platform. What I'm looking for in this session is I feel that marketing today, especially with digital marketing, it's very crowded, and for you to stand out, you need to have some innovative ideas to kind of, like I said, break the clutter. So that's the strategy that I'm looking for as we
Hi everyone, my name is Vishal. I don't have a very exciting startup story as one of you guys. I just recently graduated in March. I started working after that. So I did my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. And so basically I've had two different marketing experiences. In my internship, I did my internship with Coca-Cola. So that was a FMCG marketing experience. Then for the finance placement, I sat for a digital marketing profile because I wanted to explore this side also. So now I'm a digital marketing manager in MobiQuick, and I handle two of their B2B businesses there. So I'm just here to know more about the different facets of marketing and how it links with the other silos like finance and sales and everything, how it connects the dots.
Hello everyone, I'm Samya and I'm also maybe the youngest of all here. I'm currently a student at IIT Delhi, third year student, and we are working on career guidance for college and school students, and we are on the ideation phase, about to pilot in next 1 or 2 months, and I'm here just to learn from all of you people and to know all of you.
Okay, good. So I thought the best way to do this, because of the diversity of the group out here, and I've heard, are you, sorry, I'm sorry I missed you out. Are you part of the, going to come join? And why don't you introduce
Don't
yourself?
Sit behind, just pull up a chair.
Yeah, just come.
Find squeeze in. We'll make the circle larger.
I thought you were taking notes on our behalf. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anshul. I'm the founder of The First Draft. We are basically a consultancy where we link freelancers with companies. We generate content, curate. We work with digital magazines. We work a lot on self-publishing authors. Basically, we are filling in the gap what new age authors are finding difficult going for the traditional publishing. And even in self-publishing, they are not finding a way to edit, design. And in a time when everything is going digital, they find it very difficult to deal with freelancers separately. So here they can easily edit, curate for digital magazines especially. So we curate content, rewrite, and of course we do design. So my co-founder has experience in publishing with various publishing houses, while me being from NIFT, I handle the design. And our whole idea is not to provide like just one team. We do it as per the requirement of the client, depending corporate, fiction. So really it's very expertise. So that's the whole idea.
Good. So, since you got a very large, diverse group in different areas, and some of you were very specific about what you're looking for from this meeting, what I thought we could do is I just want to give share some thoughts based on the experiences which I have, give you what I would consider the basic principles of marketing, especially for a startup. And then I'd like to ask Ravi if you want to add to that. And then perhaps we can just make it more a Q&A because it's very difficult to sort of match the expectation that all of you have. So I think that would be the best.
I think this was supposed to be a 45-minute session.
Yeah.
So not really a brainstorming, but more to get a little bit under the surface. Yeah,
so what I thought I'd do is I've actually jotted down a few. So my typical approach is that whenever a company approaches me and asks me to be their mentor or to be on their advisory board, my first response is, I want to spend at least 3 months with you before I take a call. So there are a few things which I need to first decide. Number one is, what is the value you provide to your customers? What's your idea and what's the value you provide? And number two is, and I need to figure out whether I can provide any kind of value. And if then there is a match, then I'm willing to go ahead and continue to spend more time. So these are my learnings for the last 6 months. So in that process, I've actually sort of interacted with about nearly a half a dozen companies, and I've finally chosen to work with about 3 or 4. Typically 3 which is on a regular basis, and the other 3 which is more that if you need my advice, call me, right? And then there are a few which I just dropped because I found that they weren't really listening and they wanted to do things their own way. So these are some of the learnings I have, and I'm going to focus only on those areas which are primarily related to marketing. So one of the first questions I ask any startup when I meet with them is, who is your customer? And you'd be surprised that most of them are not able to define who their customer is. And that's the first message I want you to do, is to be very clear about who your customer is. And I'm going to come back to that theme a little later. The second, what is the value you provide, and how does it fulfill the need of your defined customer base? So you should be able to define your value very, very clearly. Again, most startups, the challenge is that when they start off, they usually get some family and friends to do the funding. They have an idea, and by the time they get to the second or third year, it's actually morphed half a dozen times till they get to the first round of funding, where at least then it's reasonably clear. But it's only after that, with actual experience, when they start working, that it becomes absolutely crystal clear. And how fast you get to that differentiated value proposition is the most important, and more important and equally important is the customers you're planning to serve. So that's the second question, is that what is the distinctive value you provide? And I can give you some examples of that. The third is, how does your product or service differentiate from your competitors? It has to be very clear, because I can tell you that for every idea each one of you has, there's at least another 10 to 12 companies who are thinking the same way. Some of them are already launched their product and service, and they're way ahead of you. So, what makes you different? So let's talk a little bit about and give you some examples. So I'll give you the example of the healthcare company which I actually invested in. I actually invested in it blindly because the guy used to work for me, and I used to like him, and I thought he was a great entrepreneur. So it was in the area of assisted healthcare. And the second reason I invested in it, because my daughter is in London and she's in that healthcare industry, so I said, why not? So I went and invested some money in that. But then when I started sitting with these guys, and there were a bunch of 3-4 guys, and they've got funding from me, they got from Mohandas Pai, they got from a guy called Deepak Ghaisasi who started iFlex. So I was reasonably sure that I was in. But when I started looking at who is your customer, they ran into a problem. Because they said that their customer was going to be a patient. So they had a choice. It was the patient, it was the family. So the business they're in is assisted healthcare. It is to help people who require long-term medical care. And if you look at the healthcare system, if you have a specific problem, you go to, or need an operation, then you go to a hospital. If you need something which is just not on a regular basis, but whenever you have a problem, you go to a doctor or family clinic. If you need to get a diagnostics, you go to a diagnostic. But suppose you're a kidney patient, suppose you're a cancer patient, suppose you're old age, then you need constant care, and you need all these other facilities, but you don't have the wherewithal to go get that done. So the assisted healthcare, their idea was that we can provide that care. So it is outside of the hospital, it is in between doctors' visits, but they have their own step-down centers, and they also have their provide the care at home. So they can set up a complete nursing care center, or completely care center with nurses, assistants, everything inside the people's homes. So the question I asked them is, who's your customer? So initially they said that it was the patient. Then they said it could be the families, because it's the families, especially for older people, the families may be elsewhere. So it's basically to help the families cope with this particular challenge or problem which they have. It could be for cancer patients, it could also be for any of these. So I said that that's good. So then the next question was, what role do hospitals or clinics play, or the test, or the medical diagnostics? So their perspective was that they are part of the support system, but they're not necessarily my customers. 3 months down the line, they figured out that trying to go and recruit was a huge marketing issue, because how do you go find out that somebody's got an illness? How do you know that he needs long-term care? How do they know that how it is? I mean, getting that message out, even in a single city like Bangalore, we started in Bangalore, was becoming a huge problem. So then they figured out that the best way to do that is to go to the hospital and get the hospitals to refer. If you think about an Indian hospital, what does the Indian hospital do? They'll do the operation for you, but once it's done, and they'll milk you for everything you've got, and once that's done, they want you out of the hospital so that they can give the bed and charge another bunch of customers. Now, where does this poor patient go? He may go home, in which case he needs care there, He may go into what we call a step-down center, where he gets another week or 10 days inside a complete hospital-like environment, and then he gets taken home. So they figured out that one of their potential customers are actually the referrers are all from the hospital. So therefore the marketing strategy, so the customer is the patient and the families. The strategy was to go to the hospital and get them to refer. It was to go to the medical clinics and get them to refer. So they then become part of the ecosystem. So very few companies at this stage have the luxury of lots of money which you spend into marketing. And one of the things which we decided as a startup is that we will put the least amount of money into marketing. We'd rather build the back-end infrastructure and we'd put more money onto the people side. Because if we can show that we have, even wheelchair in the US, if you want to have a wheelchair attendant or an ambulance, somebody who's sitting in the ambulance, they all need to be certified. Right? Now in India, we don't do that. So how do you do that? How do you get the nurses? How do you get doctors? So we've got doctors, nurses, all part of the payroll. And the whole idea is to be able to provide that level of service outside of the hospital system. So therefore marketing was basically focused on building the connects with the ecosystem and using them to refer the patients. And what it turned out was, people are willing to pay a lot of money just to get this done. They're not willing to skimp, provided you know that you can build the trust. So building the trust as a brand was very critical, very important. Editorials and blogs is what they used. I notice a lot of companies don't use that, but blogs is a great way to get your message across. Participating in digital media, LinkedIn, Twitter, depending on the class of customer you want to get. So again, I'll paraphrase that, but getting people to know about your company is very, very critical, and being part of the ecosystem is a good way of getting that out. The other point I just wanted to highlight was another case, which is the IoT company. Now in the case of the IoT company, it was industrial automation. It was his biggest, his value, he used to call it IoT and he used to call it KPIs. It was very difficult. He hadn't really articulated the value which he provided. And it turned out his value was not the fact that he could do IoT, because there are perhaps a zillion companies today who can do IoT. It was the fact that he could integrate into any old industrial age control system. So he could interface in with the Allen Bradleys, he could interface in with the RCA Brown Boveri control systems, the Honeywell control system, which is a tough job. In most cases, the IoT guy comes and says, rip out this and put in a whole bunch of new stuff. So for him, it was articulating his value, or his mission, or the differentiated value which he provided, to figure out who were the competitors from that perspective. And then what he did was, he went after a selected set of customers, he won those, and it turned out most of them were in the chemical and the process, which is the toughest to automate, not engineering, because engineering is relatively easy. And then he used them as references to continue to replicate. So for example, now he's standard with any of the Aditya Birla Group companies. So that to me is also marketing, because you build your references, you get your value sharp, you build your references, you build the success story, and then you go out. So from a B2B, this was actually something which worked out very well. So I'll stop there, because I think that's the other one. There were a couple of others which I thought was a big challenge. So this is I will not name the name of the company, but it's a CRM. It's called one of those what's next company. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term what's next, but when you have a CRM system which is supposed to help the salesman, typically that information should enable him to say, what should I do next? So this is what the data I have about the customer, these are the calls I've made, this is the input you get from many others. Now the issue is that, what's my next step? Should I make another call? Should I go higher up? Should I actually give a quote? What was the situation like in similar such cases? And then it prompts the salesperson to tell him what he should do next. And it's based on the probability of the success which they had in previous cases. Sounds brilliant, great technology, right? When I went deeper into it, the challenge was they just said that we wanted to go after all corporate. No differentiation as to what kind of corporate. Segmentation now is becoming very critical. I mean, this is the, even you take SBI, State Bank of India, I'm on the board. So when they define their customers, they have only 5 categories. They have financial inclusion, which means the poorest of the poor. They only have Jan Dhan Yojana accounts, and they've got 10,000 bucks. So basically, they give all the services for free. State Bank actually loses money. Can I get some water? State Bank actually loses money on these accounts. Then they have what they call the rural. Then they have the urban. Then they have the wealthy. And then they have the super rich. Now, to me, that distinction, that segmentation is too weak. In each one of these, you have to dive much deeper. And it was the same thing with the CRM company. They just had these very broad chunks. I'll go after the hotel industry, I'll go after the telecom industry, I'll go after the finance industry and banking. But they didn't have a unique value proposition for each of these different kinds of segments. So therefore, segmentation becomes much deeper. If you want to go after banks, do you go after the large banks? Do you go after the private banks? Which ones do you go after? So they didn't have a very clear-cut strategy around each. So just like SBI, I've been telling them that they need to have a much clearer strategy. They've got the products. All you need to do is to take individual products, put it into a certain form, and then you can go out to those particular segments. And that's what the strategy should be. So segmentation in the modern world today is very critical because that will help decide your choice of digital media and regular media. It's very critical for you to do that because that's what digital marketing enables you to do, is to address a customer of one. And especially as startups, that's what you should always think of. This is my value, this is my customer, and how can I tune it for just one customer and then replicate it across the board. Right, so if you can fine-tune your message just for that one customer, that's the best. And given the fact that now you have a ubiquitous device which people look at all the time, you can actually do that. And you have to just figure out how to do that. Okay. I'll just pause here because there was another company which I was working with, which I thought was very interesting because this guy came out with a unique financial accounting package. You've all heard of Tally? Now, Tally is a great product, but what Tally did was it took a normal ledger and put it onto a spreadsheet, and that's basically their claim to fame. What this guy did was he actually put business rules around it so that you just have to tell the system that this is the nature of the expense or the revenue, and it will automatically decide which ledger. It will then create the balance sheet, it will create the P&L on the fly. And then he also went and added GSTN. Now the challenge he has is that he can go out and offer this to 50 million small and medium enterprises. The problem was, how do you reach 50 million small and medium enterprises? And he's been trying many different things. So he's built up a 10,000 user customer base in the last 18 months. But that's too small. He needs to get a couple of million, 3 million, 4 million. So he went to the chartered accountants, tried to break in through them because all the chartered accounts are part of that. He started talking to specific enterprises with large distributor and vendor chains. He went to the large SIs like Wipro to get his product approved so they could offer it to their customers. So he's doing many things, but it's slow and painstaking, especially when you're doing a B2B. In a sense, it's small, medium, so there's very large volumes. He's always asking me, how can I accelerate? I said, the best way for you to accelerate, if suddenly you can get the attention of Mr. Modi and you can get Mr. Modi to tweet about your product, your life is made. Now the challenge is not the ambition, but the challenge is how do you get there, right? So I don't know whether he'll be able to make that happen, but the point is that if you can get a few very influential people to tweet about your product, it makes a huge difference, right? Ultimate in India would actually be Modi, and not far behind would be Donald Trump. Okay, so I'll pause here, I'll leave it here, and then perhaps Ravi, you could add something.
What is the name of this enterprise?
This enterprise, IDS. Yeah, IDOS, I think it's called IDOS. I'll give you the name properly. Yeah, Ravi.
Okay, I think we have two new people who joined us. Before you came, we've just done a round of introductions. So can you...
I'm Roshni and she's Meghna, and we own a startup, a digital marketing agency.
Both of you are together?
Yeah, we're partners. So we've just started about 11 months ago, and we started out as simply freelancers, turned it into an agency. Now we're standing as an LLP in the industry with more experience in lifestyle and fashion per se, but complete digital social media marketing, all portals with content creation and ORM as well as client servicing.
Okay.
So there's a match here somewhere. Somebody was talking about digital marketing. Oh yeah.
Do content curation. We don't
No, that's content. No, somebody was asking me about the challenges of digital marketing.
Okay, so I'm going to just talk about 4 or 5 marketing principles. Because after that, as Bhaskar said earlier, each of you needs a dedicated discussion on how in your business you're best suited of the market. Some of these points actually pick up from what Bhaskar said. I think the criticality of naming your target consumer, it's almost like.
They're recording.
Okay. I think the time that you take to identify your target consumer or customer or B2B is absolutely critical, because fine-tuning your product or service offer and how you're going to reach your customers. I'll just give a very crude example. I know this is from a very old world example, but I find it very powerful. When there was only Doordarshan, people used to advertise on Doordarshan and used to pay big bucks, because Doordarshan used to pay, because they had reach. With cable TV coming in, people realize they don't need that reach. If I have a product which is sold only in North India, why do I need national reach? The subdivided services are not started. If you go down the line, today you have very, very fine-tuned channels in terms of their reach, and the extreme is digital, where Bhaskar talked about you can have communication and offer for each customer. But to do that, you really need to identify your target segment well. And there is this standard deviation curve. There are some customers with whom you are likely to get success. So if you look at the benefit versus cost, the benefits are very high. And there are fringe customers on both the left and the right. In your early stages, are you really looking to go the whole spectrum? Are you also going after the fringe customers, which means your offer has to be wider, your costs have to be more? Or are you wanting to start with only the middle, and as you get growing, you can attack more and more the fringe customers? So I think a lot of time needs to be spent to identify your target customer. I'll come back to this point later. I think you talked about a B2B business, and I think even your business, because I was talking to your colleague. So while you may be in B2B, the B2B is actually servicing a customer. So all businesses are finally a B2C customer. Even if it's a computer, finally there is a buyer who's taking a decision to buy the computer. So I think it's important for you to know what is the mechanics at play between your B2B customer and their customers. What is the sort of dialogue which happens? What is necessary to make your B2B customer win in his business with the customers? So just keep that in mind as you're developing your offer. The third one is portfolio refinement. You may have started with a particular portfolio, but as you get more comfortable with your target segment and the competition, you need to keep refining your portfolio. And I'll give an example which is an old world example, but it's quite a startling example. Philips as a company, most people know it as a radio 2-in-1 and television company. They've actually got out of that business. Today they don't make radios, 2-in-1 television, VCRs, DVDs, nothing. They are a medical electronics company and small domestic appliances like electric iron mixer. So I think there are very few examples where people have completely revamped their portfolio. People talk of why did Kodak fail, etc. But Philips realized that in the business they were in semiconductors and television, the Koreans are going to outdo them. So they completely changed their portfolio, and today they are one of the most high value companies in the world. Distinctiveness, I think competition is going to be there. In any business, even if your idea which you thought of, if it starts getting customers, everybody copies success, and there's nothing wrong with that. Competition will come sooner than you like it. And I realized this when I was in Tata Motors commercial vehicle business. The early days of Uber and Ola, there was a lot of buzz about how small loads will also get Uberized. It's a fact. Today, if you want to shift just your television from one house to the other, you don't have to go to an ACA or employ an agent. You can employ an Uber type of service to get a truck at your doorstep, the rates is fixed, everything is fixed. But we started talking to a company called the Shipper because we wanted to take stake in them. Within 3 months, we realized there are 7 or 8 such companies. Shipper, porter, this, that, whatnot. So there is competition, whether you like it or not. So you need to look at how you can keep tweaking your offer to make it distinctive. You may be the first, but you're definitely not going to have that starting advantage for very long. For very long. So the sooner you build equity with your customers and finally keep treating your customers well. Because while others come, if you have happy customers, whether B2C or B2B, they don't switch that easily. Price is a factor, but if they're happy with the services, they don't switch that easily. So I just thought I'll leave these 4 or 5 principles, which actually applies across the board. And given the limited time, maybe we should have some interaction.
Yeah. Just wanted to add one other point, which I thought was important, and I noted it, but I didn't share it with you. It's not just about your mission as a company, what you decided to do, the value which you provide. When you think about your value, think about what it does to society, nation, and the globe. Because that becomes very critical as you build your brand. So when you think of Uber, you think of a taxi service, but when they came out, they always talk about the fact that how they save the environment, right? How they provide employment. Those are very important attributes.
Empowered a lot of drivers.
Day one, you must start thinking of that. It may not happen immediately, but at least before you get to an IPO, think about it. That may be way ahead. But from day one itself, you must start thinking about it. Day one, you must start thinking about the human element. What kind of, I've asked many CEOs or founder CEOs, what kind of people will you hire? You should listen to their answers. Right? Every company requires distinctive, different kinds of people. Be clear upfront what kind of people you're going to hire and how you're going to retain them as part of your journey. You have got to establish your value system and your cultures upfront. So think of it from that perspective. This is where you are. I think the broader picture from day one, the initial stages, what you're focusing on is going to be more important, but you need to start building up those ideas from the beginning. Just one other example I want to give is that I'm also on the advisory board of a company called My Kind of Job. It's a portal, job portal, and they compete with the masters and everything, but they're only focusing on people who want short-term jobs. So if, for example, you want a content writer, but only for, let's say, 10 hours or 20 hours in a day, then this is the site to go to. Right? So the question I asked him, who are you, who's your customer? The person who's looking for the part-time employment, who's got a specific skill, who wants to only do it part-time, or is it the people who hire such people? And he was, in fact, it was directed at the people who hire such people. Now the strategy for each, or whether it's the person who wants the job or the person who will hire the person, or the company which will hire the person, the strategies are completely different. Very, very different. So therefore you have to be very careful about deciding who is your customer. So once he told me this is it, then my mind shifted and I said, look, this is a different way of actually how you go about it. Okay, I just thought I'd add to that.
Plays to that point about how finally can you define your customer. And maybe you can add another group 6 months later or 2 months later. But at this moment, for a particular service, the closer you can define your customer, the better it is.
Yeah, this one, the problem was he wasn't even sure. I mean, I had to be sure whether it was B2B or B2C. So he wasn't very clear when he explained it to me. But then finally, I got him to put a stake on the ground and say it's B2B. Then the whole thing changes. Where you spend your money, how do you attract new people, who do you serve it, who do you look after? Okay, so I just wanted to make that clarity. Sometimes you can do B2C but through B, which is what my healthcare company does. But when it's pure B2B like the IoT company, not an issue. But then sometimes you have these other cases where you are a B2B but you think you're B2C. So this guy's gone and spent huge amounts of money creating a portal or a software which is very much like
2 minutes?
LinkedIn.
Okay. Okay, we are almost running out of time, but I think we'd like to hear some voices. Yeah.
You talked about product differentiation, right? So, but you see a lot of companies around the world, like you talk about Uber and Ola, and you have Didi and Uber in China, and then you have Lyft and Uber in China. The products are not at all different, but they still between the market. So if the market is big enough, do the products really need to be different?
I think it's very important for you to be able to indicate what is that differentiation. If you are number two, your first differentiation is going to be in terms of value. Right? The second could be the segment which you are catering to. While Uber, because it took the lead, covers everybody, including corporate, you may decide I want to do only a particular segment. Let's say you want to do only women. The market in India is big enough. You have to do your study, figure out what it is. Right? So I think those are the things which you may say that I will have a survey where it is to take school children to school in the morning from this period to this period, and you have a class of service, and then after that it is focused on a different segment, and then in the afternoon, and you stick to that. You don't then have a generic kind of. So it's really, you can differentiate even if you are not number one, knowing that without the differentiation you most probably will not succeed.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
You have to look for the differentiation. And while Uber and Ola may be similar, my son works in a startup in Bombay, and in the morning he goes by train, evening he comes by cab because he can work in the car. He will give you enough reasons why he feels Ola is superior to Uber. And it has nothing to do with the fact that Ola is Indian and Uber is multinational. It's not driven by nationalistic reasons. And he has some very good reasons why Ola is better than Uber, and he's only on Uber 80% of the time. So there is no getting away from that. Otherwise you'll be driven into a price game only, which you don't want to do. So you have to look for differentiation. It may not come so easily, but that's going to be the goal.
The challenge with the B2B business is like when you're dealing with corporates, there's a bureaucracy. Is there a secret for navigating that? Like, for example, he has a personal grooming company. He wants to get into Uberoids. He wants his products
to get
into Uberoids, like the hotel chain. He wants his products to be in every hotel chain, every room. How do you break the bureaucracy? Meet the right manager, meet the right person in that organization. Because B2C, if you write creatively, if you're giving that quality, as long as you've done your bit, the consumer will, you will follow the lead. But with the B2B business, there is a sense of bureaucracy because especially in India, from the Indian perspective, job roles
You're absolutely correct. There's no question about it. A lot of it is through a formal tendering process and qualification.
Formal or informal.
And you have to go through that. So you have no other choice. Now, if you really have something which is really truly distinctive and you can relate it to the business value which they can get. If, for example, what you have can help the Oberois get 500 rupees more per night, that's the way you should state your proposition. Then you'll get everybody's attention. But if you just go there and say, I've got this nice product which will make your room much better to look at, may not cut it. Then you'll have to go through a regular process. Right? So you have to really think that.
So if I can say, first of all, you have to accept, not complain, that there is bureaucracy. It's like if you have bad eyesight, you have to accept and start wearing specs. So the fact is that we are in a transitionary phase. Some of the older economy companies have bureaucracy, but then you have to find a way to crack that. And finally, networking works everywhere. So you have to find a way to reach the right people and get through. It's not just hotels. Even if you approach a Tata Motors, it's very bureaucratic. But you'll have to live with that and find a way if your offer is towards that company.
You can try that, but especially when you have a product which you want to scale it into a large organization, just the cost of doing a trial is huge. Even if you give, and one thing I'll tell you, you give anything for free, nobody respects it in this country. So never give anything for free. The moment you give it for free, they downplay the value.
You wanted to ask something before we.
There's certain times that the nature of the business is not just B2B, but
Speak a little louder, there's too much noise around.
As an agency, I feel right now that I'm not just B2B, the nature of my business is also B2C. Where is that fine line? Where should we draw that fine line to define ourselves that are we B2B or are we B2C? There are so many natures of business that will be serving both B2B as well as B2C. For my client, I'm a B2B. That is my business. That's where the money comes from. But to market a product that my client has, I literally turn into a B2C. So where do you define yourself? Like, can you be both at the same time? Is it possible to do that? Are you like losing out on efficiency? Or
I think you're talking two things. Your customers are businesses, B2B, but they in turn are selling to C.
yeah.
Right? So their customers are consumers.
Exactly.
So therefore you need to understand the consumer business. So you are a B2B company and you need the skills and expertise of the consumer industry. So that's the way I look at it.
Are you selling directly to the customers also?
Eventually, the nature of my business is when I take up a client, I have to sell their product because I'm a marketer, correct? So I have to understand the consumer industry, like you said, consumer behavior most importantly, at least in the segments I'm working with, because the client is eventually coming back to me saying that, is your value adding anything to my firm? Otherwise, why am I even retailing your services?
My suggestion is stop thinking whether it's B2B or B2C.
Yeah.
Just go after your customer.
I think
That's all,
that's
you know.
the first time when you said that you have to define yourself. It's the first time I thought about it today because you said it out loud. Because I've always been feeling that I never had to decide what if I'm B2B or B2C. Because eventually I'm actually servicing both.
No, you're not. That's what I want you to understand. You are servicing your B2B.
The client.
The client is the more important. To be able to service them well, you need to understand the consumer industry. That's where you need to focus on the kind of expertise you want. So if most of your businesses are in the fast-moving consumer goods, you hire a FMCG people. But don't say that, just so that make another customer who's selling motorcycles. You can't then service it with the same kind of people. Then you have to go hire people who understand the auto industry. So be very focused because as a startup, it's great to see if you can do all of them. Start with one and then extend yourself. Because everything you do will be different. Expertise will be different. Even your channels which you use, media, communication, will be different for each one of those kinds of things. So that's my suggestion that as a startup, try and remain as focused as possible unless you have something so unique that it cuts across everything. Yeah, and be the first in it. And digital media marketing is the big guys are all there. Sapiens and Accenture, they're very big in that. They can afford to have all this millions of people who are acting as consultants to all of these guys. So stay focused and be very clear who your targeted customers are. Are you national or local? Even more important.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Sir, I would like to share my part of thing, which I think would also answer his query, because that ultimately is turning out well for us. So I think to approach those people, those bureaucrats, you have to design some campaign. Obviously, this is an obvious thing to reach them. All right. So I'll share what worked out for us. So we started doing podcasts, for basically for improving our value proposition. And in order to do that, we started reaching out those bureaucrats, all right, to fulfill our needs. Like one speaker, and we started with one guest, and then through that guest, we reached out to more. And ultimately, we are seeing that happen for our thing, that we are reaching out those bureaucrats who we wanted to in our sector. So that thing worked out for us right now.
You are done.
So in that way, creating a campaign, standing out in those campaigns, obviously very much you have to think a lot in creating those campaigns. But doing something.
This session is done and our direct involvement is over. After Raman, there's a second set of sessions. We can be an observer there. That's what you mean, right?
The users, they have very much curiosity in this thing, podcast. So we started out with that, and ultimately it reached out to those bureaucrats. So that's how it worked for us. So I guess something like that, if you can think of a campaign, it would work.
How many of you have had some experience with mentors? You have had mentors? It could be even from family or friends. All of you have had.
Yeah.
So the first principle of mentoring is to listen, but it's not necessary for you to agree to everything. Otherwise, you won't be an entrepreneur. So I think it's very important for you to understand is that mentoring is all about people like us sharing our experiences. It's the benefit you get is a function of the questions you ask, right? And we can relate it with our experience. Coaching is different. Coaching is all about you telling you what you should be doing. So there's a big difference between coaching and mentoring. So be very clear about the relationship you want to build. Whether you want to coach a founder or CEO of a company, or you want to help the mentor. Okay, so I'll close it here. We're around for some time. If you want to answer some more questions, quite happy to.
I think we've got the next session lined up. So thank you. Wish you all the best. We'll meet you more often, hopefully.